Hi guys, it's James from the Lore Masters, and we're back again with another new deck profile for you, and this time we are showing you Amethyst Ruby Control. It's a deck that I've been playing a lot over the past week or so. I've even hit the Grandmaster rank on Pixelborn with it, just to kind of showcase how strong the deck actually is. If you just want the deck list, here it is on your screen, but if you want to stick around and listen to why I've chosen certain bits, then please do. And here we go. Right, let's swap over to the list view. There we go. So the deck runs 44 characters, 4 action cards, 6 songs and 6 item cards. So we're going to begin with the characters, so we'll begin with Maleficent Monstrous Dragon. So it's a 9-drop 7/5 with 2 lore points and reads, when it enters the board, you get to destroy one of your opponent's characters. Very, very useful because not only does it develop your board, it also gets rid of your opponent's biggest threat. So very, very handy to have. It is well worth the 9 ink, but if you do see it early, at least you can ink it until you get to that point in the game. So here is my tech for the mirror match. So it is 2-drop, inkable, magic broom, 2/2 with 1 lore point. When you play this character, you may shuffle a card back from any discard into its player's deck. So when you're playing a control mirror match, they generally go very long, and it often goes to deck out. So this is our way of not doing so. So we generally shuffle back our cards like Friends on the Other Side, Dragonfire, or even Be Prepared. And then we're getting towards the late stage of the game where we're running out of cards. We start shuffling back copies of Magic Broom, so we can just keep shuffling back over and over. And by that point, our opponent has probably run out of cards. If you're not against a lot of control matchups, you can replace this card with the 2-drop Ruby LeFou, and it will work absolutely fine. Okay, we run 4 copies of 3-drop Maleficent, so she's a 2/2 with 1 lore point. When you play this character, you may draw a card. So very, very useful to play on turn 3 because she replaces herself when she comes in, so it doesn't really matter if your opponent uses removal on her. She's also a very good target for Friends on the Other Side, so you can do that on turn 4 and then play whatever you'd like. But yeah, very, very solid card, very, very good for a common. Okay, so we run 4 copies of 1-drop Archimedes. So he's a 2/2 with 1 lore point. So we play this against the aggro matchup, because if you're going second, you need to be able to match their aggression, and Archimedes is a good way to do it. You can play Sergeant Tibbs if you did want to instead. It really doesn't matter, they do the same thing. But yeah, it's all about matching your opponent's early aggression so you can get to the late stages of the game and start dropping your big cards. Because if you don't match their aggression, they're just going to win before you can do so. Okay, so we run 4 copies of Rafiki Mysterious Sage. So it's a 3-drop uninkable 3/3 with Rush and 1 lore point. So again, this is for the aggro matchup, but it's very handy at just running over your opponent's characters that are damaged towards the late stages in the game. But yeah, it's primarily to run over things like 2-drop Simba when you're facing against Amber. But yeah, it's quite useful to have a 3/3 with Rush that only costs 3. Yeah, it's a nice cheap answer. Okay, we run 4 copies of 2-drop Gaston, so he's a 4/2 with Reckless and no lore points. This card is very good against the Emerald Amber aggro deck because they use Kuzco. So this card alone answers Kuzco, but also Mad Hatter as well. But it's also very useful at taking out your opponent's Simbas. Works very well with Rafiki as well to kind of clear the way and then Rafiki run over something. The only time that I wouldn't play this on turn 2 is if your opponent plays a turn 1 2/2, because just playing this and crashing into it is never going to feel that good. Okay, we run 4 copies of the 3-drop Aladdin Street Rat. So it's a 2/2 with 1 lore point. When you play this character, each opponent loses 1 lore point. So very, very handy towards the late stage of the game when your opponent has developed a lot of lore. Not so handy in the early game when they either have 0 or very little lore. But yeah, it's nice to kind of take lore away from your opponent because it then kind of adds turns onto their game plan. But we also run the 7-drop Aladdin that we can shift this card onto. So very, very handy. It is also a target for Friends on the Other Side if you wanted to do that. Okay, so we run 2 copies of Elsa Spirit of Winter. So it's an 8-drop uninkable 4/6 with 3 lore points. It has shift 6, but that doesn't really matter because we don't run any other Elsas. When you play this character, exert up to 2 chosen characters they can't ready at the start of their next turn. So very good to lock down your opponent's 2 best characters, because it then allows you to answer it at a later time, but it also locks their board. So that means that if they want to use their copy of Be Prepared, they're going to have to take their own characters with it. But you generally find when you play this character and lock down their 2 cards, they'll continue to develop their board. So you can often get your opponent with a Be Prepared by using this card to sing it next turn, and take out a big board with just using this, and then play your bits after. Very, very solid card. The only reason that I'm playing 2 copies of it is because I'm already running 16 uninkable cards. The deck originally had 20 and the draws were absolutely awful, so we had to trim some bits, and an 8-drop uninkable was unfortunately one of the bits that got trimmed. Okay, so we run 2 copies of Ursula Power Hungry. So when you play this character, each opponent loses 1 lore. You may draw a card for each 1 lore lost this way. So it is 2 power and 8 toughness with 3 lore points. So similar to Maleficent, she replaces herself when she comes in. So it doesn't really matter if your opponent then uses removal on it. Also messes with your opponent's lore, which is very good against aggro, but also very good against other things as well, because at the end of the day, they're all trying to get to 20 lore. But yeah, very, very solid card. Again, only running 2 copies of it because it's a high cost uninkable, and you don't want to have too many in your hand. Its 8 toughness is very useful. It can even tank a hit from the 9-drop Maleficent and still live. So chances are you're going to get a couple of turns of questing out of this. Okay, so we run 4 copies of 5-drop The Queen, Wicked and Vain. So it's a 4/5 with the ability Exert, draw a card, 1 lore point. So we've got lots of ways in this deck of untapping our cards, so we can utilise them to kind of draw multiple cards from this a turn. But it's a good static card for a 5-drop as well, gives you some nice draw cards, even if you're just using it once a turn. It allows you to build up your ink towards the late stages of the game. But yeah, like I say, if you're simply just drawing a card just to give yourself more resources to remove your opponent's bits, then yeah, it's a great asset to use. Right. So we run 4 copies of Aladdin Heroic Outlaw. So it's a 5/5 with 2 lore points and shift 5. When you during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you gain 2 lore and each opponent loses 2 lore. So very nice to steal your opponent's lore points. If your opponent has only got 1 character on their board, you can always quest with this card first, then use Shield of Valor to untap it, then attack your opponent's card, kind of kidding. You gain 4 lore, your opponent loses 2 lore. They're very, very handy, and we run the 3-drop Aladdin so we can always shift onto it. Like this card, like it a lot. Right, that brings us to our last character, which is 4 copies of Maui Hero to All. So it's a 5-drop inkable 6/5 with Rush and Reckless. So this card will generally run over anything that's the same cost as it, as well as running over a lot of things that are more expensive as well. It's very handy because it does have that rush, so you can literally don't have to put it down a turn early, you can just put it down and run over anything. Your opponent generally has to 2-for-1 to get rid of this, because it is so big. But yeah, even if your opponent doesn't want to exert any characters, so you can't attack anything, you can always use this card to sing friends on the other side and draw 2. But yeah, very, very good card, one of my favourite cards in the whole set. Right, that's all the characters, so let's move on to the action cards. So simple enough, we run 4 copies of Dragonfire, which is just a 5-drop uninkable banished chosen character. Not very good against aggro because generally all of their characters are a lot cheaper than 5, but when you're against control, this card is absolutely invaluable because you can just remove any threat that you want. You generally find recycling it to be a fantastic idea, just with the magic brooms, just so you've got that removal. But yeah, it's just nice to be able to just kill anything with a 5 ink spell, which is very, very good. Right, let's go on to the songs. So we run 4 copies of Friends on the Other Side. So a character will cost 3 or more can sing this song for free, draw 2 cards. Even playing it just as a free cost is very good, but we can also pair this with our 3-drop Maleficent to draw lots of cards. One of the best draw cards in the game. But yeah, absolutely amazing. It's a pot of greed basically. So yeah, play 4 copies if you're playing Amethyst. So here's probably a bit of point of contention. We only run 2 copies of Be Prepared. So it's a 7-drop uninkable. A character with cost 7 or more can sing this song for free, banish all characters. The reason why we are only playing 2 copies rather than 4, which I know a lot of people do instead, is because we're already running a decent amount of uninkable high cost cards, and against the aggro matchup, you're going to get absolutely destroyed before you can even cast any of these. So you need to find that middle ground in the deck, so you can play your aggressive cards to get rid of theirs, get towards the late stage of the game, and then you can start playing cards like this. I know, like I say, some people prefer playing 4 copies. I find 2 is absolutely fine, especially as I can shuffle them back with Magic Broom later. Just to kind of point on this as well, if you're against more experienced players, they will not overextend into this card because they know there's a good chance you're going to be using it, so you don't get a tremendous amount of value. So the more kind of experienced players you play, the less you're going to remove a lot of things or get a lot of value from this card, so it generally isn't worth the 4 copies. Okay, so it brings us on to our item cards. So we run 2 copies of Magic Mirror. So it's a 2-drop uninkable item with the ability exert and pay 4 ink, draw a card. So this is what keeps you in the game in a long drawn out mirror match or just against any control deck, because it just keeps your hand nice and full. It's very handy when you are getting a mirror match because you can drop a couple of characters and draw a card when you get into the high kind of ink point. But yeah, it's also useful on turn 4 because this deck hasn't got a lot of turn 4 plays. I mentioned earlier you can do Maleficent on turn 3, then use it to sing on turn 4. You generally kind of want to draw with Magic Mirror on that turn 4 as well, because you can't utilise your ink any other way. But yeah, it's just a very, very solid card. I would play more copies if it wasn't uninkable, but unfortunately it is. And here is one of the kind of the MVPs of the deck, should we say. So a 1-drop inkable item, Shield of Virtue. I think I called it Shield of Valor earlier. It's exert, pay 3 ink, ready chosen character. They can't quest for the rest of this turn. So there's lots of different cards we can utilise with this. So Queen, Aladdin, Maui to get 2 attacks out of it. We can also use it to stand our own characters up, so our opponent cannot attack them, which is very handy, especially with our 8-drop Elsa, because my opponent's Maui can just run over it. But yeah, there's a lot of cool tricks you can do with this. It's basically a reusable LeFou or Fan the Flames, and that you can just use over and over and over. Right, that is the deck as a whole, guys. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're not already, because we've got lots of things like this coming. I'm going to even upload some gameplay of me playing this deck so you can kind of see it in action. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.